Welcome to the Diary of a Muse podcast. I'm Tess Day, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here with me, embarking on this journey of discovery and transformation. Today, we have Sophia Hanson, founder of the Speaker Sanctuary, joining us. Really lovely to have you here with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here. See where our conversation goes today.
First of all, I just, for the listeners here, I just wanted to touch on a little bit about you, so you can sort of settle in and become familiar with what you might be exposed to in our conversation. So you're often referred to as the good witch, but you say, truth be told, you use your time-tested techniques and wisdom to transform people from a bag of nerves into captivating communicators capable of mesmerizing any room. Gosh. So you use a combination of coaching, mentoring, hypnosis, and your dedication. That is the dedication of your client, where you actually help them drill deeper into their self-belief, get them in the zone, and then help them build the confidence they need to trust their words, to flow in front of a crowd. And the best part is you say you don't have to pretend to be anybody else. I love that. It's time to untie the real you, and it'll feel like coming home. Well, if that's what you do for the world out there, I think that's pretty remarkable. And just on that note, having a look at some of your Instagram posts, and some of the things you've written in your blog as well, it really resonates with me that you are very heart-centered. This is just not about quick fixes. This is about genuinely diving deep into someone's experience in life and helping them transform. So I'm really excited to see where we're going to go today. But Sophia, just tell us a little bit about what you've been up to, perhaps in the last, I'd say the last kind of 12 months, because I know you've been involved in quite a few projects. You've written a lot of articles and are published in many, many places. So tell us a little bit about where you've journeyed in the last 12 months.
Gosh, it's interesting when you start to look at a time span over 12 months and try and work out what exactly has happened over that time frame. I do know that I've worked with some wonderful people over the last 12 months, and often the people that you would expect to already be confident in terms of public speaking are often the people who really need the most support. So I've done a lot of work with people in that specific area over the last 12 months to make sure that they go from that, oh, cringe, don't know what they're up to, just feeling really uncomfortable, to feeling a whole lot more comfortable in their own skin. And I also did fulfill one of my longer term goals over the last few months, and that was to create a digital download so that people can go away and just make this one small purchase and then have everything that they need to listen to get rid of that initial fear. So that's a couple of the things that have happened over the last 12 months. Had a lovely holiday in Turkey as well. So been bits and pieces going on, but nothing too extravagant.
A little bit nice work-life balance. I love the idea of the digital download, because sometimes, perhaps learning a little bit before you start working directly with a professional can actually just, ensure progress is easier, would you say?
I often find that if people are still in the absolutely petrified, like cannot even imagine standing in front of a room, it's really helpful for them to start off here because they take away that initial deep rooted anxiety. And then we can build all of the practical skills and the understanding as to what works best in a room full of people.
Yeah.
And of course, if somebody prefers to come and dive straight in and do the deeply personal and tailored work first, they can do it that way, but it's just up to an individual what works best for them at that point.
Yeah, so you're covering both bases. Glossophobia, let's just go straight there. Tell us what this is, because I've seen you've written a blog post. I've obviously explored it now because I've read it, but just tell our listeners what glossophobia is. I was thinking lip gloss, I was thinking all kinds of things, but I knew it had to relate to sort of the work you do. But yeah, fill us
Yeah.
in, please.
So glossophobia is essentially the fear of public speaking. Now, even just the phrase fear of public speaking is not entirely correct because most of us are quite happy to stand up and actually say something out loud. The fear is a lot more deep rooted and tends to be more around a discomfort in being listened to and in actually being heard. And all of that ties back into feeling judged, feeling criticized, feeling like perhaps you're not good enough, you're not going to say the right thing, people are going to be disappointed, they'll laugh at you. There's so many layers down. So it's not really a fear of public speaking, it's a fear of public judgment. And with that inside, what people tend to fear, apart from the shaky hands and the dry mouth and the kind of tremble or their voice
Mm.
shaking and all of those kind of things, it's just that real unease within their own body of, oh, like they just want to squirm. And it's that severe discomfort at actually taking up space and really allowing yourself to be present that doesn't only feed into how you are in public, it feeds into every other part of how you are in your life. So if you can overcome that to the point that you can stand in a room, speak to a group of people as though you're just speaking to one person, then it really supports you to become much more accepting of yourself, but also not to take yourself so seriously because we get so bent out of shape. Like, is everything just exactly right? Am I standing right? Am I looking correctly? Are my slides right? Am I loud enough over here? Did I look at the right number of people in the room? And all of those things are just extreme form of self-consciousness that completely gets in the way of connecting with the people that you're trying to talk to in the first place. So yeah, there's a lot of layers to glossophobia, but
Yeah.
layers that I love to unpick and unravel.
Yeah. Nothing that you said there did not resonate. I mean, absolutely. I can sort of think about how many times I've stood up in a room to speak and experienced all those things. Yeah, from the basics, as you say, the sweaty palms, all those things. But it's not even the imposter. It's so much deeper than that. So yeah, very, very true. And I've never heard it explained like that before. So interesting.
And sometimes it can really take you by surprise. It isn't even the moments where you are speaking to people who you deem as, a particularly important scenario.
Mm.
I remember once when I was in my 20s, I went back to my secondary school to ask if I could do another higher. I'd already graduated from uni, but I wanted to go and do higher modern studies. And I
Mhm.
went back into the school. I spoke to the deputy headmaster, and then he went to get one other teacher to come in and talk to me. And in those few moments sitting back in that schoolroom, some six years after I had left school, my throat completely closed over. And I was sitting there with tears streaming down my face. Every time I tried to
Wow.
speak, no sound would come out. I was taking big sips of water to try and calm it back down, and I just
Mm.
couldn't get any sounds out whatsoever. It was just making this little squeaking sound. And
Yeah.
eventually the headmaster kind of put me out of my misery and said, I think we've probably already covered what we need to cover. So shall we just pick up on email afterwards? I was like, yes, please. And I just left thinking, oh my gosh, I'm hot, I'm sweaty. I felt like I was melting. And I think more than anything, it was just that deep sense of panic. It wasn't even about that conversation. So it
Mm.
had obviously triggered some kind of memory of being back in that school environment, which just it's what
Yeah.
triggered all of the physiological sensations, which then triggered the fear. And then I was just not in a good place to even have that conversation. So I know how uncomfortable it can be no matter what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. So it's not always the obvious.
Mm.
It's the things that and being prepared or understanding yourself, I guess, in the work you do with your clients would hopefully give them the tools to be able to manage anything if it came up. Yeah.
And it's supporting themselves too, because often when we start to speak in a situation like that, maybe we say the wrong words, maybe we jump to the wrong slide, we repeat something. And instead of continuing and just supporting ourselves, like you would a good friend, you're doing a good job, carry on, just
Yeah.
keep going, you're doing really
Yeah.
well. We start to come into, oh, you idiot, why did you do that? I knew you were going to mess this up. So all of that inner critic kicks in when actually what we really need to do is support ourselves in the same loving way we would support somebody else. And when we start to know that we've got our own back, then we
Mm.
start to see the support in the people in front of us instead of assuming that they're all looking at you with critical eyes, thinking the worst. So everything comes from in here. And actually, that's where the speaker sanctuary part, as the name of my business, comes from,
Mm.
because we assume that somebody else has to come and rescue us and throw us a lifeline and please just get me through this situation. But actually, if you can go deep enough inside, then you find your own sanctuary. And that is where your speaker sanctuary is. And as soon as you
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
that, everything on the outside feels a million times more comfortable.
Yeah, because it is our relationship with ourselves before
Mm.
anything else, and our little inner voice, that little chatter, the critic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, obviously public speaking is one thing that you obviously promote and focus on in your line of work. You obviously help people with a variety of other things, depending on what their needs are, because obviously they might come to you for public speaking, but then later on you find there's something else that needs maybe deep diving before they'd be ready to do that. But also with hypnotherapy, there's often still, I think, a taboo associated with, oh, someone's going to come in and take control of me, and I mean, I've been through it myself. I know that's not the case, but how do you demystify that taboo, or make people feel comfortable to trust the process?
I think, like anything in life, things change and things progress. And there probably was a time in hypnotherapy where a hypnotherapist would stand over you. You will never smoke again. From this moment onwards, you will be changed and transformed, and you will never again touch the nicotine. And we don't do that anymore. Well, I don't do that anymore. So for me personally, hypnosis has been a long time coming. I trained in yoga more than 15 years ago. So I approach everything from a very holistic, heart centered point of view. And with hypnotherapy, the person in the chair who is seeking the change is the person in control. If they decide that I'm going to go and I'm going to listen, but I don't want to change and I'm not going to change, we're not going to make change. I'm not here to try and convince anybody to do anything, and nor do I get somebody in the chair and try to make them do something they don't want to do. They're the person who has decided something has to happen. It has to come from me and it has to be now. They've put their hand up and said, can you help me do this? And only at that point will I say, absolutely. If I have somebody phoning me saying, oh, I don't know if hypnosis is for me, I don't really believe in it, it's not for you, or at least they're not for me, because
Yeah.
I have no intention of taking their money to spend hours trying to convince them that this is going to work. It just makes it a much harder job for them to make the change. It makes it a much harder job for me to have to consistently try to convince them that it's going to work. So I always work with people who are already kind of self-selecting and saying, I'm ready. I want to do this. I want the change now. Can you help me do it? So yeah, we're 100% not in control of what is happening and going to
No.
make you go out and do things you would never do. If you want to go and stand on a podium and dance, I can help you do it. But if you don't want to go and stand on a podium and dance, it's not going to be a side effect from our work together. That's very
Yeah.
much your kind of stage hypnosis where it's specifically done for entertainment.
Yeah.
And that's not what we do here. No one has ever left here clucking like a chicken.
You took the words right out of my mouth. And I think that is the thing. I think from an entertainment perspective, that's what we've always observed and had a view of. But it's the intimacy of a hypnotherapy session or working with somebody who has that skill. It's not really televised or shared because it's a very private individual experience. So yeah, people have to, well, they like to hear from other people. How did it go? You know, um,
There's also no two experiences the same.
yeah,
Even one person might come to me for subsequent sessions, either for a similar thing or something completely different. And their experience of each session will likely be different to the one before, in the same way that if you make a pot of soup and then you make another pot of soup a week later, the carrots are slightly different, the turnip is slightly different, maybe the leeks, then everything just tastes a little bit different. And so one person's experience of hypnotherapy will not be somebody else's. So sometimes you might feel light and floaty, you might feel heavy and warm, you might feel slightly cool, you might feel as if you are watching yourself from the outside. Other times you think, no, I know I'm here. I'm just thinking about my shopping at the end of the day. All of these things are actually completely normal. It's hypnosis itself is a narrowing of your focus. So instead of thinking, as you might be right now, I'm in a room, I can see a plant, I know that there's a picture, I know that there's a window, I know that there's some chairs behind me. All of those things start to go from the peripheral vision far more into less and less of an awareness of what's out there, and then more into the body, and then beyond the body, until you're really just focusing on the breath, and then your eyes are closed and you're in the perfect kind of dream state to be able to make all of those changes. So it's actually a very, very natural state of awareness to be in. People go in and out of hypnosis on a daily basis. If you have ever driven your car home, parked up, and then thought to yourself, "Oh, I don't remember parts of that journey. How did I
Yeah.
even get here?"
Mhm.
And that's just because you've gone into autopilot and you're driving from your unconscious part of your mind. And hypnosis is the same. You're just automatically going into a very narrowed state of awareness where the outside world is not what matters. It's your rich inner world that is making all of the changes. So it's a very special experience.
It is. And I think also there's a sense of safety because you have somebody in the room with you who is almost aware of what your needs are and are guiding you directly to focus on that. Because a daydream or just going into autopilot where we are is probably directed to the things that are most present on your mind at the time. Whereas coming to you, for instance, would be helping that person to shave away things that are getting in front of what they think they would like to have.
Yeah.
Because
And I'm
sometimes I would
very
imagine that changes once people have their breakthrough, it opens up other areas of interest, right?
everything changes,
Yeah.
and everything everything can change quickly as you're ready, or it might take a little bit longer to change.
Yeah.
But if it takes longer, it's also because that's the time scale that you are ready for that change to happen. When I have somebody in the chair, and this is my hypnosis chair over here in the corner, when I have
Yeah.
somebody in the chair, then I am calibrating the whole time, which literally
Mhm.
means they have their eyes closed, they're away in their own little zone, and I am watching in a gentle way, like a shepherd tending their
Mhm.
flock. I am watching for the softening of the face, the relaxing of the jaw. I'm watching for the movements of the eyes behind the closed eyelids, for when the shoulders drop down, for the breathing. Occasionally, you'll see finger flickers or movements of the hands, and that's generally in response to something that I'm saying. So it's very much a dynamic interaction, even although that person thinks their eyes closed and there's nothing to see. There's a
Yeah.
lot for me to see, and going on what I can see and my interpretation of that is how I know how much further to go with something that we're doing, when to give the words of reassurance or comfort, when to get a little bit louder and more confident and empowering, and when to soften it all the way back down and just reassure them that you're in a safe place. I'm right here with you right now. This is just a memory that's coming up. It's not real anymore. It cannot hurt you. And so creating the space for all of that magic to happen is an absolute honor and a privilege, because
Yeah.
change is literally happening right in front of my eyes.
Yeah. And for the peace and realization for that individual to have that breakthrough, it's phenomenal. I've spoken to one or two people who have been who have worked with you for different reasons. I mean, obviously it just came about. Oh, have you ever worked with Sophia? Because it is phenomenal how she's helped me. One lady in particular had a very, very bad addiction to chocolate. And she said, "Oh my goodness, I've actually managed to pull back and control it. It's not forefront of my mind anymore." And we're not going to mention names or anything. If she does listen to this, I think she can feel very proud of her success. But it is interesting. It might start off with something like that, but you learn beyond that. So before we go any further, I do know that I asked you to bring a quotation with you today to our chat. I'd be very curious to know what it is. Would you please share it with us?
Absolutely. So this has been one of my favorite quotes for a long, long time. I am a keeper of quotes. I have several notebooks jam-packed full of quotes, so it's almost difficult to pull out one. But I
Yeah.
think this one is wonderful, particularly in relation to overcoming a fear of public speaking. So it's from author Marianne Williamson, often attributed to Nelson Mandela, but it is from author Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be?
Beautiful. I mean, it is something I have heard on many occasions and read myself. I align completely with it. Being a South African, of course, when Nelson Mandela said it in his inaugural speech, it just resonated. I think it is very powerful. Part of me loves it that much. I think everybody should have it in their home, next to their bed, and we should read it every day just as we step out, because it's very empowering. And a beautiful way to move into a little bit more about the background of Sophia Hanson. I know I'm not exactly sure the date when, but you had quite a life-changing experience. Do you want to just share a little bit about that with us? And let's see how it aligns with this beautiful quote you've shared with us today as well.
Sure. So I've had many, many life-changing experiences over my years. Probably one of the most recent ones, and perhaps one of the most surprising ones, was that I discovered in 2017 that I had a 3.5 centimeter hole in my heart that required surgery to close it. For reference, a 3.5 centimeter hole is the size of a tea light candle, so it's quite significant.
Huge.
And we discovered this hole quite by chance. I'd been doing some breathing exercises that involved lots of pulling down movements with the arms, and I felt like I'd pulled a muscle somewhere in my chest. And so several conversations with the local pharmacist and then visits to the doctor, back and forth to the hospital. And they concluded that this was a 3.5 centimeter hole, which is known as an atrial septal defect, which is an ASD. Essentially, it's a birth defect and something that had not been picked up for my 4 decades at that point. Now, what's also incredible about that is if you've ever got to the end of something like Miss Marple or some kind of crime series, and at the end you think, oh, it's so obvious, of course that's what it was. And if you had watched that final episode first and you had known who the culprit was, and then you went right back to the beginning, it would have been so obvious the whole way through. Like, there's the evidence and they did this, and did you see the way they looked at that person? And oh, that's why they lied about this particular situation. That's why the boots were a size 9. All of those things become really obvious. So once we knew that I had this hole in my heart, it became very obvious that I had had lots of symptoms in my life which were caused by that, but which had never ever been attributed to anything like that. So I'd been told perhaps I had some asthma, perhaps I was just an anxious child, perhaps I was more introvert and I just preferred to sit at home and read books at the weekend than go out and climb on a climbing frame with 6 other friends at the weekend. So there was lots of different things that all of a sudden just made a lot of sense. Also, the way that I used to work in a really, really focused way, and then I would just kind of crash and burn out for a few days, and I go back to this high-powered, focused way, and then crash and burn out again. So hearing that I needed that surgery was a really big shock, especially when immediately afterwards they told me not to do things like don't go on any flights, definitely don't take any long haul flights, don't do anything that involves too much exertion. And I thought, okay, so in my life I've been whitewater rafting, I have jumped off the side of a mountain with a parachute, I have been to India, I have been to Dubai, I have been to New Zealand, I have been to Australia, I have been to Nepal, I have been on the longest long haul flights you can imagine. And suddenly they're telling me, don't do any of those things. They could be dangerous. It's like, I've already done them all.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
need. But it's
No.
interesting that, again, that's around the mindset, isn't it? So when you didn't know there was anything, you went ahead and did it. Fortunately, it was all okay. So have you done anything like that since?
Not anything
No
to do with
need.
my heart. I just didn't feel like I needed to do it.
Yeah, you've done
I've
it.
already done it. I've already done it. I
Yeah.
did go on a very fast inflatable when we were on holiday in Turkey. I persuaded a lady that we had met at breakfast one day to just come and get on this inflatable, and we were thrown around the water at a
Yeah.
ridiculous pace, and we just screamed our heads off for the whole time. But for me, I didn't. I just find it amusing that I was being told not to do all these things that I had always done. I mean, I'd been up Ben Nevis twice with this hole in my heart.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just thought you just have to push through. You know, when you feel tired and you're not sure if you
Yeah.
can, you just keep going with it. So initially, they tried to do something called the Amplatzer device, which would just mean a small procedure where they would pop this device in through a catheter and then they would inflate it. So if you think like a cocktail umbrella, where it's small to start with, and then it would be inserted in through the hole, and then they would inflate it, and it would cover over the hole in my
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah.
But what happened was that the biggest Amplatzer device that they had was almost exactly the same size as the hole in my heart. So there was then a fear that if they did that procedure, it could fall into my heart itself, and then it would require emergency open heart surgery. So although we did the initial investigation, would this be suitable? We decided it was too risky, and we just went straight for open heart surgery. So that was straight for the big operation instead.
Yeah. How has that changed things for you? Because obviously before that you didn't know it existed. You'd had symptoms, life was what it was, but no
Yeah.
limitations, right? Clearly, from all your adventures. So how does that shift? How did that shift for you afterwards? Recovery, um, going out again in life, now knowing.
Yeah. I think it's very different for everybody. Again, back to how one person feels when they speak in front of a room to how does somebody else feel. There'll be similarities, but there are several tiny nuances that make a really big difference. I had spoken to some women who had had open heart surgery before, and they were telling me, you'll have a scar right up to here, you won't be able to move, you'll be very depressed, your life will feel like it's over, all of these different things. And I was like, I don't fancy the sound of this, and that's not going to be my experience. And so I went with the opposite feeling. When I went into hospital, I took flip flops instead of slippers. Probably not the most health and safety conscious thing to do, but I felt much happier. I love the sound of the flip flops going along the floor. It makes me feel like I'm on holiday. It makes me feel relaxed. It doesn't give me I'm 555 vibes when I'm just sneaking around a hospital corridor feeling bad about myself. I also took a really nice, brightly coloured kimono that my dad had brought back from me from Japan several years, probably decades earlier. And both of those things just helped me to feel a bit more comfortable. And after surgery itself, on the first day that I woke up, I remember thinking, I can't move. I felt like everything was so stiff and so hard and so uncomfortable. And within 24 hours, I was on the rooftop of the hospital, on a little balcony area with my husband eating ice cream. I was home within 3 or 4 days, and I was told just start off walking slowly, short walks, see how you feel. And I think within less than 3 or 4 days of being home from hospital, I was able to walk 3.5 miles on my own quite comfortably, not feeling in any way vulnerable or unsafe. And it was just about building up that confidence within myself again that, yes, I've had a really big procedure, but my body had actually had to work a lot harder for the 40 years before because it was pumping the oxygenated blood back in to be oxygenated again instead of around my body. So actually, I suddenly had a huge reservoir of strength and energy that I'd never had before. And that made me really determined to get back out there and to feel really good about it. The part that I wasn't prepared for was that, and I say this lightly, but not lightly at the same time, when I came home from hospital, I was essentially a drug addict. Because even though I'd only been in hospital for 3 or 4 days, I had been pumped with so much morphine. And then I went from all of that morphine available the day I was in hospital to at home told to take up to 8 paracetamol a day. And I
Yeah,
remember
highly
that first
controlled.
night lying in bed, I was shaking, I was sweating, I was cramping. And it was a good week afterwards where I realized, oh, I was detoxing. You know, I
Yeah.
just thought that was some kind of shock or trauma, but actually it was the drugs in my
Working out of your
system.
system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. There's so many factors that go on. So how do you see how do you see hypnotherapy? Had you qualified in hypnotherapy prior to this, or was it something that came along kind of in between it? How does it all knit together?
It's kind of fascinating in itself because I read my first book about hypnosis when I was 15. And I really wanted to be a hypnotherapist in my 20s, but I ironically didn't have the confidence to go and do it. I didn't think I'd
Oh,
be able to do it. I felt really paranoid about, gosh, what's that going to be like if somebody comes and says, I want to stop smoking, and then I hypnotize them and they still smoke? Like, oh, it just felt
yeah.
really confronting. Like, that's the worst thing in the world. It's not just, oh, I might be quite good at it. It's like there's somebody there puffing away. You're clearly not good at it. So in my 20s, I was like, oh, I'm quite nervous about doing it. And I didn't do it. And ironically, I went and trained to be a yoga teacher instead. And again, in terms of visibility and showing up and taking your place in the front of a room, I was trying to choose between teaching Pilates or teaching yoga. And I chose yoga because in my head, I figured that yoga teachers could ask their students to close their eyes more often, which meant people were not looking at me. So that's how much that fear of being at the spotlight,
Yes,
in the
yeah,
limelight,
yeah,
at the front of the room, being the leader. It's like, oh, everybody come and close your eyes. Oh, thank goodness for that.
yeah.
So hypnosis kind of wind its way in right
Mhm.
early in those days. And then I did a qualification somewhere kind of, oh, I don't know, 2016, 17. And then I keep topping it up. I think with anything, you find one teacher, there's parts that you pull from them, you make it a little bit your own. You find another teacher and think, oh, wow, I love the way that they do this. It's so much more sophisticated or more impactful or more in alignment with how I would love to be. And then I would bring that in. So I'm always consistently learning. I will never be done with learning. Learning is my
No.
passion.
I think in any realm where you're helping other people and you have to almost understand it yourself and develop yourself, there is constant learning. I think Tony Robbins calls it can I, constant and never-ending improvement,
Yeah.
which is lovely. But I think there is also a time as a professional development and staying up to date is important. And I think often for people as well, at what point do we actually learn to just love ourselves as we are, and not over pressurize ourselves with too many expectations? Um, because that can also be quite a limiting mindset and behavior to have.
I find it almost the opposite. So the more that I learn, the more that appreciation I
Yeah,
have for
yeah,
the world,
yeah.
the more love that I have for what's possible. And I never, I mean, goodness, I remember reading years and years and years ago, no matter how much you learn, there will always be somebody who is better than you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I might get to my very last breath, whenever that comes, and that might still be true. There will be somebody else better than me at one particular thing. But for me, that doesn't feel limiting. It feels quite freeing. I'm not trying to be any of those things. I'm not trying to be the best at anything. I'm just doing, and it's the old cliche, I'm doing the best that I can do. But so much of the work that I do is not, I'm not self-sufficient in the work that I do. It completely depends on the dynamic and the rapport that I have with the person in front of me. And nobody else on this planet will have the dynamic and the rapport with the person in front of me that I have. And if they've come to me because that's what we have, then I am 100% the best person for them. And they are the best person for me to work with in that moment. So I just love learning. There's every time I learn one thing, there's like another 15 things that I can go straight
Yeah.
into. And I find that really inspiring. I'll never tire of learning.
Yeah, no, me either. I think it's exciting, you know, really exciting. So let's look at a few things here. Public speaking, I know that is your overarching speciality, but obviously you help people with a lot of other things. There are quite a few things I've wanted to sort of just ask you about, because not everybody wants to be a public speaker, to speak on the stage. And I know that you refer to that, in your writing. But imagine being able to be comfortable enough to do that. How else is it going to expand your life? You mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation today. What about communication in relationships? You
Yeah.
know, how does learning how to be confident as a public speaker relate to that?
I would challenge anyone to find me even one reason to not become better at public speaking. It just changes every part of your life. The way that you will communicate in meetings, the way that you will interact with your partner, with your children where relevant, with your family, with your friends, the way that you hold yourself, the way that you speak to wait staff when you go out, the way that you speak to checkout staff, the way that you interact with the world comes from the way that you interact with yourself. And if you are constantly pulling those shutters or that cloak around yourself and saying, don't look at me, don't listen to me, I'm irrelevant, I'm not good enough, your energy is introducing you before you say a word. So if you're going around in this, not worthy, nobody talk to me, just look at the body language and everything that comes with that. People can tell how you feel about yourself by the way that you're holding yourself. And if you are scared of public speaking, if you're nervous, you're automatically going to be in this downtrodden kind of looking down, don't look here. And as soon as you start to allow what is inside of you to be enough, to be loved, to be supported, to be strong enough, to be confident enough in your ability, and to trust yourself that whatever happens out there, whether the slides don't work or a window falls down or a dog starts barking, to trust yourself to be able to deal with whatever comes up in that situation, all of that just, it's like a kaleidoscope of color coming back out of you again. And when you tap into that, you really develop the deep rooted belief that you will deal with whatever comes to you in life. And it changes how you communicate with yourself. And as soon as you are willing to support yourself and to be there through the hard times and to not just say, oh, come on, sort it out, get over it, this is ridiculous. That harsh inner critic, as soon as we can change that voice, everything just, in my mind, I'm imagining one of those fabric softener adverts now, or one of those like plug-in air fresheners where the room is all horrible and grotty and grimy, and then suddenly one of these gets plugged in and switched on, and the butterflies start to float by and the flowers come out and everything's a wonderful symphony. But that's how it feels when you should make that shift from, I hate this, I don't want to do this, I'll do it if I have to do it, and you're hard and you're stiff and you're firm and you're just trying to get through this, and if it's not right, you'll hate yourself afterwards, to I'm here. Let's have
And
a
I'm ready.
conversation about
Yes.
whatever we need to.
Yeah, yeah,
Brené Brown, the American author, and I won't say sociologist, she has many titles,
yeah.
a researcher, a storyteller researcher. She has this wonderful phrase, which is strong back and soft front. And that's so much of what we need when it comes to public speaking, but for life as well. And it's the ability to, excuse me, trust yourself to stand tall with your shoulders back, to be open to the world, but also to have the softness in the heart to be able to take in whatever is going around you and still maintain a strength and a softness and an openness to whatever that is that's happening. So I love that phrase, strong back, soft front.
Sounds beautiful to me. It's like having that spine, right?
Absolutely.
And then all the squishy stuff that wraps around it that we need to sort of, yeah, just have some fun in life.
It's the perfect blend of the masculine and feminine energy.
Mm.
Strong back, soft front.
Like, and I guess that comes through in the yoga as well.
Mm.
Having that
Yeah.
core strength. So the focus is almost like if we start with public speaking, as you said, kaleidoscope, it opens up other doors of opportunity. And an individual can decide how far they think they want to go with it. Sometimes it's taken out of their hands because as that confidence grows and you're able to talk more or be able to talk more in a room, I suppose you get promotion, you get thrown into another field of opportunities. And what about anxiety? Because anxiety is a huge thing right now in the world. It's a big word. We hear it thrown around everywhere. How can working with you, even if it is just focusing on public speaking, how can that anxiety piece be shifted?
Beautifully. In a one-word answer, beautifully. If I think back to a particular client, and I have permission to share bits and pieces, the very first time she came to see me, I opened the front door and she kind of crumpled into me, like through the front door, and she was shaking from head to foot, absolutely shaking like this. And she's held out her hand and said, look at my hand. And it was like this. So we came through to the kitchen and I made her a cup of tea, which is what I do for everybody. And I said to her, "You're safe here. We're only going to do what feels good for you today. And you can
Mhm.
stop me anytime you want to. But by the time you leave here today, in an hour's time, I promise you, you will feel better than you feel right now. And you will know what you need to do to calm yourself down until this passes." Okay. So we did various different techniques and we did a lot of talk around mindset and understanding how her mind was. An analogy I use often is like a car alarm. So you typically want your car alarm to sound when somebody is about to crowbar the door and make off with
Yeah.
your car. You don't want your car alarm to sound because a butterfly has landed on the windscreen. You don't want your car alarm to sound because a dog has walked past on the other side of the street. You don't want the car alarm to sound because it started to rain. You only want the car alarm to sound when there is an actual imminent danger that you need to do something about. And anxiety is basically that car alarm that has become incredibly sensitive and overactivated. And so we're retraining the mind, the unconscious part of the mind, which is responsible for more than 90% of what happens in our life. We're retraining that part of the mind to recognize this is not an actual danger. This is something that we can control and come back to. Sometimes it's about changing your breathing, changing your physiology. Sometimes it's also about recognizing, actually, I've got too much energy. And if I'm just trying to calm it down, I feel more stressed. And in those situations, I'll say, if you're shaking, don't suddenly start doing deep breathing and trying to calm yourself down. That's just energy with nowhere to go. So
Mm.
if you're shaking, shake.
Yeah.
Put on some music, have a proper shake, shake your arms out, shake your arms overhead. And so it's learning how to best support yourself in that situation. That particular lady was unable to go to work. Her husband was working away from home. She was unable to drive herself. She didn't want to be in the house on her own. He had to stay at home for her for that period of time. And over the course of our work together, she went back to work. She drives. She was up and down to Edinburgh. She was down to London, visited Buckingham Palace. She's
Mm.
back at friends' weddings. She's just completely taken her life from this black and white, quite depressed scenario to full technicolor again, just from learning how to work with her own wiring. And she had already come through a kind of medicalized system where it was, here's some medication, this will help. And all it did was numb her down even more until she didn't know who she was and couldn't really feel the feeling. She just felt numb or suppressed all of the time. Now, of course, there's different routes for different people. And for some people, medication is absolutely the answer. But for her, it was learning to take back that control, recognize that where she was putting her focus all of the time either was helping her or wasn't helping her. But her life is completely transformed.
That's life-changing for everybody,
Yeah.
because I think there is a ripple effect that comes from that. It's not just the individual who's been with you, whose life just gets so much better. Again, it filters out into those relationships, those connections, life experience, especially close family. Sometimes if somebody's not really well, it can cause everybody else to start behaving differently around that individual, which affects how the whole dynamic works, memories, experiences. So you might help one person, and in turn, that affects the lives of maybe 10, 15, 20 people
Yeah.
without them
And
having to do anything.
and the danger often for people who experience strong anxiety, severe anxiety, is that exactly as you just said, the people around them start to treat them differently. They stop inviting them to do things. And the reinforcement loop within the person experiencing the anxiety becomes, even they don't think I can do it. And so
Yeah.
they retreat further and further back. Occasionally, we find what we refer to in hypnotherapy as secondary gain, which basically means sometimes there's a benefit to being seen to be that anxious person. And if they have anxiety, don't bother them, or they have anxiety, we shouldn't ask them to do this thing. They actually have some benefits to not overcoming the anxiety. They're short-term benefits, very
Mm.
short-term
Yeah.
benefits, but they can often find themselves in that space of, well, actually, if I get rid of this anxiety, if I learn how to master it, For some people, maybe they need to go back to work and they've been signed off. Maybe they get given more responsibility at work. Maybe they start having to do more things within the family that they didn't have to do before. Sometimes they might even have to go out and socialize to things that they didn't feel comfortable socializing in. So there's so many layers, and it's very different for every person. But there's a really exciting moment in any of those hypnotherapy sessions or coaching sessions where you can just see that you're very, very close to that breakthrough. And if you're quiet enough, you can hear that penny drop.
Or that flick of the switch, that moment of, because there's that saying, life can change in an instant, but so many people get stuck for so long, they don't actually realize that it was that moment where the
Yeah.
brain decides, okay, this feels so good. This is what I want life to be like. And suddenly everything that held us back fades into insignificance because you think,
Yeah.
gosh, that 2020 vision statement, if only I knew then what I know now. But sometimes we have to go through that journey. I think there's so many labels, we can frame things in so many different ways. But how would the process begin? I mean, I know on your website there is a place where someone can click and have so you call it a curiosity conversation, curiosity.
Curiosity call. Yeah.
Yes.
Essentially just for that person to raise their hand and say, this is something I'm committed to doing. How does it work? And really, it's a bit like a first date. You're kind of working out, do I like the vibe of this person? Do I feel like they can support me? Can they give me the reassurance that they need on any questions that they've got to ask? So all of those things kind of come up on a curiosity call. I think the most important thing for anybody considering hypnotherapy is I'm not the person doing all the work. I'm facilitating the work. If someone is coming to me, get your magic wand, wave it around, make all the change happen. Some of that change will happen, but it's not going to give them the feeling of empowerment and trust within themselves. When somebody is willing to say, okay, this is not working for me. I know something needs to change. I know it has to be now. And I know it has to come from me, us and them. And then they pick up the phone or send me a message and say, can we arrange a call? Then I know that they're already empowered and enough of a self-starter that we can make that change. So the people who are, oh, I'm probably hopeless, and hypnotherapy works for other people, it's not going to work for me, and just don't think I'm cut out for it. I'm not here for the bottle feeding. It 100% has to be,
No.
okay, I'm ready to make the change. I'm ready to go to the next level. I know that I can stand up and speak in a room full of people. I don't enjoy it. I know I can do better. I know I can be more me. I know I can connect. I know I can rip off this performance mask. I know I can prepare better. I know I can speak more kindly to myself afterwards and continue to learn. And I know I can make a bigger difference for the message that I need to convey to those people. And I know that I'm there to serve. And actually, it's just getting over myself enough so that I can do that. They're the people that I really love to work with, because actually public speaking is not about, when I'm public speaking, it's not about me. It has to be
No.
about those people, and it has
Yeah.
to be about the message, and it has to be about the connection, the interplay that you have back and forth. But most people make it all about them. Oh, they're looking at me, they're thinking about me, they're judging me, they're doing this. And then you just go into this downward spiral where you just want to disappear and go back in like a reverse Jack in the Box.
I loved your example of internal dialogue, or shall I, shan't I, shall I, shan't I, or what about this, or what about that? Because that's the crisis point that we go through. But often there's something that happens. There's that turning point where a person gets to that place where they go, okay, this is enough. I cannot go on like this anymore. I need help. Or I want to break free from these shackles in whatever form that's going to look like.
So here's a really brilliant example of exactly that, where we think, oh, we'll just overcome the fear of public speaking, or we'll just overcome this fear. And it's so much deeper than that,
Yeah.
and a far wider ripple than that. Somebody came to me, let's call this person Marie for the sake of the conversation. Marie came to me and said, I have a fear of flying. I can get on a plane, but I am heavily medicated. I have to drink vodka before I can get on this plane. I will think I'm going to die as soon as I book a ticket I will psych myself up. So going right back, they will psych themselves up to book the plane ticket. As soon as the ticket's booked, I'm so selfish. I'm going to die. My family's going to be so upset. Why did I do this to myself? I don't deserve this holiday. I shouldn't have done it. I should just have stayed at home. So they came to me and said, can you help with fear of flying? Yes. So we did the work together, overcame the fear of flying. This person then went on holiday to Florida, had an amazing time, came back, sent me a message a few weeks later. So it's really weird. My friend just invited me to Belgium for the weekend and I've just booked a ticket and I didn't even think about it. It was just like booking a train ticket or booking a taxi. They just did it.
Wow.
When again, no concerns, no panic before, no panic during, no panic after. Went from being unable to hold a conversation on a flight, having to just have headphones on, read a book, look out the window, feel sick, keep talking to themselves, to, this is really good. There's passengers next to me I can have a conversation with. So that fear of flying, gone. And then they said to me, can you help me with an embarrassing problem? I thought, oh goodness, you can imagine as a hypnotherapist, that's not a message you want to get. What kind of embarrassing problem are we talking about here?
Yeah.
Ultimately, no problem is embarrassing, but you always wonder where it's going to go. Can you help me with an embarrassing problem? Sure. What's the embarrassing problem? I have a fear of public speaking. Okay, that's what we're going to do. So they came along, we dealt with the fear of public speaking. That person was then praised by their bosses, was given the opportunity for a promotion, which they then accepted, and they moved from Scotland to Abu Dhabi. Now, could that person with a fear of flying and a fear of public speaking have
Yeah.
done that? So
Yeah.
we don't just take away a little fear and say, oh, well, that's that fear gone. We take away a fundamental pin. Think of the bottom of a block of Jenga. We take away that one pin that crumbles down all the other limitations and frees you up to rebuild however you want to rebuild. And that would not have happened if they had just sat there with, oh, I don't book flights. I'm scared to fly, or I don't go on holidays. I'm scared of it, or I can't do that presentation. I'm scared of it. So they took all of that matter into their own hands, raised their hands. Sophia, can you help me with this? Yes. Bye. Have a nice life in a warmer country.
Yes. Yeah. But
Completely
you know,
different.
I think that is the point. We get so introspective over one little issue. We forget that that could be the, well, I suppose I'd like to say the plug. You know,
Yeah.
if you take the plug out and wash that all away, then that opens up a whole lot of amazing things. So this has been such an interesting chat, and I think we'll have to have you back at some point down the line for an update, some more interesting stories, because you're a fantastic storyteller. I
Thank you.
wonder how you managed to get that right.
Probably
Yeah.
7 years as a radio journalist, but many other
Yes.
reasons too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to introduce you
Thank
to
you.
my last guest because he did radio in San Diego, California as well. So you
Oh,
probably have a lot of fun things to talk about. But you know, I've loved this today. It's really nice to get up close and personal and just delve into, I guess, the work you do, because when we meet people in crowds and when we just have the light conversation, there's never really an opportunity to sort of understand on a deeper level. And I think, you know, it's phenomenal what you do, but not only that, I think the strength, the confidence, we know about that, but the certainty with which you explain what you do. And I think that would give a lot of confidence and courage to somebody who is wobbling at the knees, to know that they are in a safe place. You
yeah.
know,
And if I could share one final example,
yeah,
we
sure.
often assume that the loudest, most gregarious, most extrovert person in the room is going to be the most confident public speaker, or that you have to be like that person to be a good public speaker.
Yeah,
But I will always maintain the person who is the calmest, the person who is breathing in the most steady way, that is the person who has access to all of the resources that they need to be able to respond and react to whatever happens in that room. And so introverts are amazing at public speaking. I'm what you call a highly sensitive person, an HSP. And
yeah,
so that means that I am very, very attuned to people's energies, people's movements. I'm the person you'll sit with at lunch who is passing you the butter for the bread roll you didn't know you were picked up in your hand. So I'm always really aware of what's going on in the space. And it's that quality for other people that helps them to become fabulous public speakers. Because the people who can observe all of the time and have had a lifetime of observing have such a deep wealth of resources to be able to pull on. Whereas the person who's always out there talking and chatting and being loud, they haven't got a clue who else has come into the room. They could miss their favorite pop star or film star right behind them because they're so busy focused out here. And so the people who are naturally quieter or sensitive, you're an absolute powerhouse waiting to be unleashed. So it's exciting.
It is. And so I'd say to all our introverts out there, let's see what 2025 can bring your way. If you were to just what would the process be, Sophia? You know, if someone was to take a piece of paper out right now and just, I suppose, say, how would I like 2025 to be? What's the one thing in my way? You know, that could be an opening curiosity call with you, you know.
I would say specific to public speaking, the best thing they could do is draw a column, draw a line down the middle of the page. So you have two columns. One column is all of the ways that this aversion or avoidance of public speaking is causing problems. And that might be as small as I always have to repeat myself 3 times when I go to order a coffee, to I'm petrified, I run away and I take the day off sick when my boss asks me to present. So one side of all the ways that that fear is holding them back. And then the other column, all of the possibilities and the opportunities that would open wide if they allowed themselves to go there. And when they have those two columns, they're really going to recognize that one is like wearing shoes that are 4 sizes too small. There's blisters, there's bunions, there's painful bits. Your face tells a story all day long. And the other is, oh, my shoes are custom made and they're so comfortable. And I can grow into these and really allow that to happen and expand. And there's no limit to what you can put on yourself. You know, the person who starts off just being a little bit more vocal in a daily meeting at work might then go on to want to be on a stage, to training new people, to taking it either further than that. But it's finding what's right for each person. Not everybody wants to be up on stage doing an Oscar winning speech, but it's finding what's right for you. And if you can't communicate in the way that you want to, I liken that to when you're in the supermarket and you see a toddler who cannot express why they're so upset that they have lost their toy or that they are not allowed that chocolate bar. And so instead of really regrouping with themselves and being able to calm themselves down and express it, they are just thumping and screaming and there's hot tears. And then 10 minutes later, they just kind of pretend it never happened. And so if you can't express how you're feeling, you're not willing to go to the dark places as well as the bright places inside of yourself, you're focusing on all the triggers and not the glimmers or the shimmers, then that's a really murky, dull place to be. And when you realize that you just need to wipe that screen clean, then everything is brighter on the other side. And there is no limitation unless you want to put a limitation or a ceiling on it yourself.
You couldn't have said it more beautifully. Do you have your quotation to hand? Because I wonder if after all of that, that would just be such an amazing way to sort of close this conversation off.
Absolutely. Would you like me to read it now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be?
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. It's just been wonderful speaking to you. I'm sure we'll get a lot of feedback from this conversation today. Guys, please reach out to Sophia if you have even just one tiny glimmer of a desire that you'd like to discuss with her and see where it might take. If you have any questions, I'm sure she is definitely the person to have a chat with. So thank you very much. We'll be back next time. Do you want to be a public speaker? Do you just want to be a great communicator with your loved ones? We'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.